Welcome to Unmute Yourself, the podcast. I'm Nancy Medoff, author, speaker, and coach.
And I'm Beth Knaus, creative copywriter and the owner of That's a Spade Copywriting Services. We are done being polite and ready to get real about confidence, boundaries, and self-respect, both personally and in the workplace.
Beth and I first met when we collaborated on the best-selling communication handbook for women, Unmute Yourself and Speak Up to Stand Out. Now we are amplifying our message and taking it on the road with Unmute Yourself, the podcast. Warning, there may be, no, who are we kidding, will be some adult content. We have a bullshit button and we're not afraid to use it.
So buckle up, buttercups, because here we go.
Beth.
Nancy, what is happening?
Sup.
I'll tell you what's up. It's almost the end. It's almost the end of 2022.
It's almost the end. I feel like I need to explain to the podsters that there's a little bit of an echo. Do you think I should explain to them what happens every time we go to record a session?
Yes, but maybe don't include that private conversation you have with Zoom on your own.
I won't.
Okay.
So, podsters, and by the way, we talked for a long time at the beginning of the last podcast. So we're going to keep this brief. And also, I think it's important that they understand that what's happening is I have a very fancy professional microphone that I use. And in the 6 months that we've been podcasting together, I have yet to be able to hook it up seamlessly without chaos, strife, aggravation on my part. While Beth, like a duck, have you ever heard the expression about a duck? Like you only see the top of the duck, but under the water, the duck's going like that. They can't see what I'm doing, but it's an expression. It means that the duck is cool and calm, but underneath the water, the duck is furiously scrambling. So I'm the bottom of the duck, Beth is the top of the duck. I thank you for your patience, Beth, and I thank you for your patience, podsters, as we try to figure out my microphone situation. So it's a little echoey. My New Year's resolution is to fix it.
Yes, and you will. I have no doubt. And I've said this a number of times this year. It's the technology, specifically Zoom, I think, that is keeping us humble, because there is never one time really. I mean, you have this microphone issue, but I feel like anytime I'm in a Zoom, somebody is struggling with an aspect of Zoom. And that's just the way it is. It keeps us on our toes. It's keeping us from getting lazy. And that's just, it should be the worst thing you ever do, Nancy.
Thank you. Fair enough, right? Fair enough. I got enough in the Stephen Covey bank. Any podsters out there old enough to remember Stephen Covey? Do you remember about how you put things into people's emotional banks so that when you screw up, you can withdraw from the emotional bank? It's actually kind of cool.
Right.
So what are we talking about today?
So we thought that we would talk about our wins, our things we can celebrate, highlights from the year of 2022. Right? Because I don't know about you, Nancy. I was thinking about this. People in their job situations, whether it's corporate or entrepreneurial, they're like ninja warriors, right? They're like going through the steps of the crazy activities. And as soon as they get past one, it's behind them. They don't think about it again. They don't necessarily write down the success somewhere, take a breath, get themselves a little Starbucks. They don't do anything. And then at the end of the Ninja Warrior thing, you go, well, what did I do that was so great? Right?
Totally agree. I think we strive and strive and strive. And then what happens? Do you take a moment to celebrate? Probably not. And big wins are celebrated for a moment, and then it's on to the next goal. And that is the best way to ensure that you burn out. So not celebrating your wins and not taking a moment to look at how far you've come is the best way to ensure burnout. So we are excited to talk about the importance of celebrating wins, particularly because it's the end of the year. Everybody's laser focused on goal setting. I came from a corporate career in sales. The end of the year was crunch time. We were always go, 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 go. And we are here to tell you it doesn't have to be like that. and that when you curate a work environment for yourself that you love, it won't be like that. Sure, there'll be a little bit of, by the way, Beth's nodding. I always love it when she nods. It makes me feel smart. There'll always be a little bit of hair, I want to get this wrapped up. But the oh my God, where am I going? And the frenzy, it does not have to be like that. And this is your permission to just not engage in that activity and to instead celebrate your wins.
Yes.
Right.
I agree. And I do think also when we're in a frenzy, I mean, this is probably for all things, but I think you need that time to step back and really relax, to reflect and say, oh, that thing happened. You can't go digging back in your memory when you're in a frenzy, busy pedaling forward. It just doesn't work. It's not a good multitasking situation. You need to really sit down in front of the fireplace, little hot apple cider or some wine, and kind of look back. I actually went back through my calendar because I am one of these Ninja Warrior people. And I went back through my calendar and I was like, oh, I think I did okay. I did all right.
Mm-hmm. Totally. I think you did more than all right. There's a lot that you did that you are to celebrate. And I look forward to talking about that. What was I going to say? Oh, I forgot already. That was it. So it's not a coincidence that you have some of your best ideas in the shower. My best ideas are my first ideas. So when I first wake up in the morning and I'm an early riser, 5 a.m. usually, sometimes 6, I have my most creative and best ideas. I keep a pen by the bed. And it's because your brain has shut down and your brain has had a chance to relax and re-energize and all of that. So, and it's same thing with when you're in the shower, right? You can't be multitasking in the shower. You're doing one thing in the shower. And that's why a lot of people have their best ideas in the shower. So, couple more benefits of celebrating wins. Did you know, Beth, that it increases dopamine? You get a little hit of dopamine.
Really? I did not know that.
Yep. Scientifically proven. It builds momentum. For me, when I celebrate my wins, so I'm all about energy. That's a lot of who I am and what I do, and that's not always a positive. I choose to look at it as a positive. But for me, it changes my energy. So energy, vibration, frequency, whatever you want to call it. If I'm grinding and grinding and grinding, that's the energy that I'm living in. And I would rather say, hey, Beth, it's really cool. Let's take a moment to celebrate that we were top 25% of shared podcasts worldwide. And we stepped out of our comfort zone and started this thing because we were like, hey, our message is important and our message resonates. So let's do something different. Let's step out of our comfort zone. And what happened? There were like 2 texts about it, and then we moved on.
That's right. And then we just kept going.
Exactly. So anyway, so this is my way of celebrating.
Right. And I think that, the more things that you do that you have to celebrate, probably the swifter you're moving and the more complicated it gets, right? To say, okay, I need to stop for a second and look at this thing, but yet we know we have to stop and look at these accomplishments. So it really requires an awareness and a practice, I think, to take the time and say, this is just as important as anything else. My social posts, my revenue, all right, maybe not your revenue, but, to really stop and say, I'm awesome. And I think one of the things that's the hardest is that, when we walk away from our desks and we go home to our families or our friends or whoever they are, they're not in the work with us. And so you can say to them, hey, I just got 5 new clients and they'll be great. What are you cooking for dinner or where are we going? And we're like, and then we're like, well, if somebody else doesn't think it's a big deal, is it really a big deal? So I think it's hard.
I agree. And I think actually, and I can't believe I'm about to say this again, career salesperson. So all of the people that are listening that used to be on my sales team, you're not going to believe this, but I'm about to say, Beth, that celebrating wins might be more important than keeping your revenue target in mind. And I'll tell you why. Statistically proven that growth happens And change happens more through positive emotions than through discipline.
Wow.
So sit on that for a couple seconds, everybody. So
Wow.
I'll repeat it. Change and growth happen more through positive emotions than through discipline. So if you want to change and you want to grow, and when I think about growth, I think about numbers, again, revenue, because I'm a career salesperson. I'm sure almost everybody else thinks about personal growth or professional growth, but that happens more with, think about it, positive reinforcement. When you don't celebrate, you're not positively reinforcing the behaviors, right? So, yeah. And I would also add, I think back to last year, I was in Boston Magazine, and growing up in Boston, I was featured in Boston Magazine. Growing up in Boston, this was huge for me. I'll never forget where I was in Whole Foods. I looked down, I'm like, oh my God, this is the edition that I'm going to be in. I opened it. It looked great. I was so happy. I bought like 10 copies. All 10 copies are still sitting in a pile in the corner in my office. And I think I did a few social media posts about it, and that was it. So if you don't take a minute, and I call it 1 minute, I call it 1 minute celebrating. Remember the 1 minute manager? Do you remember the 1 minute manager?
Yes.
Tom Peters? Do you have it somewhere? We're dating ourselves. Yeah.
One of those books. Yes, I love that book.
So for the people who perhaps were in grade school when Tom Peters came out, his whole philosophy was 1 minute managing, 1 minute discipline, 1 minute task management. If you can do it in a minute, do it rather than procrastinate. So if you can complete the task in a minute, do it rather than procrastinate. Anyway, so I call it 1 minute celebrations, because you probably won't celebrate it later. So take 1 minute and celebrate it now.
Yep.
What do you think about that?
I think that's great. I mean, think of all the minutes we waste, right? Think of how many times we walk in and out of a room, or you're picking at your nails or some stupid thing, right? That we waste the time, and instead we could be celebrating, or at least noticing.
I agree. How do you celebrate your wins?
It depends. It depends on how I'm feeling and really how ballsy I'm feeling. I mean, I've gone for a facial. I've gone for an overnight. I've taken myself to the bar at Aquitaine. I have bought a Starbucks coffee or something that I wanted, in my office, or depends on what I want at the moment.
So when you take yourself to the bar at Aquitaine, this is very intriguing to me, because, and I'm going off topic for a minute. I used to do that all the time when I was single. Not all the time, but I mean, I would just go and I'd sit and have a glass of wine or whatever. I don't think I've done it in the past 6 years. So are you by yourself when you're celebrating at the bar?
Sometimes I go with my good friend Dorothy. She's my Aquitaine friend. And
Shout out to Dorothy. Does she listen to the podcast?
I hope so.
Dorothy, I hope she does. Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. I'm trying to think, this is really sad. I can't remember the last time I celebrated one of my professional wins. And I think this is the difference between when I worked for a company. I'll never forget, every year bonus time, I would go get myself a new briefcase. Every year. It didn't have to be like a super fabulous one, but I'd be like, okay, this is my pride briefcase. I'm proud I made these numbers. I'm proud I got this bonus. I'm going to buy my briefcase, and every time I go to use the briefcase, I'm going to feel really good about it. It's going to positively reinforce that, whatever. Or I would go to, I'd get a massage or something like that. But since I've been in business for myself, I have to tell you, I don't think I have.
Yeah.
That's no bueno.
Well, I think that's got to change.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Because what's the point of setting the goals if you're not going to celebrate when you achieve them?
Right. Yeah. And I think for me, like when I do things like that, especially the nicer things like the time at Aquitaine, it tells me like, I can do this. And if I keep my focus and doing what I'm doing, I can do this again. Right. And it's just reminds you that like, this is why you're doing it. It's part of why you're doing it. Right. I mean, you do it because it's what you love, because you want to help people with what you have and that sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, you also want to have certain things in your life. It can be time, it can be experiences, it can be things. And it's nice to just say to yourself, here you go.
I'm so glad you said that, because what I heard when you first started talking, and I wrote it down because it was really neat. You said the time at Aquitaine. So it's not sitting and having the wine. It's the time that you are giving to yourself, to celebrate yourself, to be proud of yourself, to think about, hey, I'm living a life which aligns with who I want to be, right? Because this is a goal that I set for myself. I reached the goal, and this is great. I achieved it. That's a win.
Yep.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm going to change mine. By the end of this podcast, I'm going to have a way that I will celebrate my wins. Interesting. I really don't. This is wild. Anyway, okay. What about, I had a good question for you. Aha. Celebrating wins versus humble bragging, or celebrating wins versus bragging. So let me rephrase. Publicly celebrating wins versus bragging. We talked about this in the last episode.
Yes. And you know what? This is really funny because somebody who had listened an episode or two ago about the money episode, they were talking about how this can potentially be a cultural thing, right? That in other countries, they talk about money, right? What things cost and whatever, what they're making, what they're spending. And I actually was in a call today where it was, talk about what your goal is for 23. And if it's a revenue goal, and then they were like, but you don't have to say it. And I thought, why shouldn't we say it? And don't get me wrong, that would make me squirm in my seat. I just wouldn't say a revenue goal, to be honest. Yeah. But if I wanted to share a revenue goal, I should be able to say it because I'm earning it. But why am I worried about if somebody else doesn't think I'm earning it, right? Because then it's really just an insecurity. So anyway, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but why shouldn't we say, this year I was challenged, or I worked really hard, or I focused on this, and I just realized that the reward for that was this. That's a statement to me. That's not saying to somebody, well, you may have only gotten 2 clients, but I got 27 clients this year. So ha on you, right? That's bragging. That's like wanting to say, I have something that you don't, or you have something that I think I should have and you don't deserve. So I think that if you want to say, you know what, I'm really proud of myself. I'm a one-man show. And this year I was able to do this. I think it's great.
I have a really timely example. I agree with you. I have a real time. And so I wrote 2 things down. One, I am going to, this is my commitment to the Podstars, to you, and to myself. In January, I'm going to publicly share my top 5 achievements for the year, what those were, right? I don't know what it's going to be. It could be the podcast. It could be helping, more clients this year than last year, but I'm going to do that. I don't usually do that. And for somebody who's in my field where, it's my life's mission to empower women to speak up and stand out, I think that's ironic. I got a text from a client today. I want to read it to you. And I want to read to you and you tell me how this sounds to you. Ready? Hi, Nancy. Hope that the end of 2022 has been good to you and that 2023 brings all amazing new things, exclamation point. I just wrapped up my numbers for the year, beat my goal, exclamation point, got to 1.1 million, and I've lost 20 pounds. Hooray for the chance to keep work and life moving. Thanks so much for your help and support this year. It meant a ton, with a kissy emoji, right? Did that sound braggy to you?
No, and obviously she's giving kudos to you. She's thanking you.
Yes. And the point of why I read it, and I think that's important, is that she was celebrating a win. And that did not sound at all arrogant, rude, braggy, in your face. She talked about money, talked about weight loss, talked about all this stuff. And I was so happy for her. And I was just so happy for her. And that's how people will feel if you say publicly, I'm really proud of myself. I had the best year ever in my business, or, I've stepped into a new role and it's been wildly successful. And, whatever the case may, and I also ran a marathon or whatever it is. I think we forget that people are happy for other people. Like, people will be happy for other people and they'll use it to motivate themselves.
Yes, I agree. I think that's a really lovely text.
I thought it was
And
great.
I think that, you know, it's also easy for her to send a text that just goes to you, but she really sounds comfortable with those wins. She sounds comfortable with it, like she would not hesitate. And I don't know her. She obviously worked with you. Um, that she'd be comfortable telling other people.
I think she would be, I do. I think she would be comfortable telling other people. I don't know about the money part. I don't know about the money part. People judge around money. And by the way, so that's a good reminder. I know you just talked about that. We are going to do a money episode number 2. So we got a lot of great feedback from that. So if Podsters, if you have anything you want to make sure we cover in that episode, hit us up on the socials or email us or however you can find us. So yeah, she wouldn't, I don't think she would mention the money, but I think what's important about that message is that she was so happy and I was happy for her.
Mhm.
I don't resent the fact that she hit her $1 million goal or went over it. I'm happy for her. And not because she's my client, because I like her.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very nice.
Interesting. So what's one thing that you're proud of?
So, well, obviously, I'm proud that we started our podcast because that's been,
Okay.
I don't really think we knew what it was going to be like. So I'm psyched about a lot of things. Do I have to only say one?
Nope, you can say all of them.
Okay, so one of the things on my list that I really, really loved was being able to go in person. And I know this isn't necessarily it is a win. It is definitely a win. I went to 3 conferences in person, right? The 2 South Shore conferences, and then I went to an event called the Amplify Intensive, which was phenomenal. And I just met so many wonderful people. And I went out and had dinners with friends. You were at some of those dinners, and it was just good to be. I love to be in person, and that just fuels me. So that was a big deal for me. We started the podcast, and this year was a little tricky. The first quarter, I had quite a few fractions, first 3 or 4 months that I had to handle. And so I did not make a ton of money in the first quarter, but managed to bounce back. And in the last 3 quarters, really kind of pulled it together. Like I'm definitely way more organized than I was the year before, and just could really see the progress of that. Not only I'm busy and I'm very fortunate to always have clients, but just to be organized in my business and, pretty much doing it by myself.
Love it.
What about you? What do you got?
I have a few actually. So obviously the podcast that has been super fun, and more importantly, we've expanded our reach quite a bit. I mean, Iceland, 23 other countries. I think that's really cool. It's about the message and the impact for me. It's about the impact. I met some very cool, different people that I ordinarily would never have met. And I've built a couple of communities, one personal and one professional, that are some kind of newer communities and people that I wouldn't ordinarily gravitate towards. And it has totally expanded my mind, my circle, my happiness. And I had my biggest client event ever. And I also decided, so I took the month of July off, and I took the month of July off not realizing what an impact it would have on my August, September, and October. So it was a very big learning for me. And I had 2 choices. This is actually what I'm most proud of, actually. I had 2 choices. I could kind of coast through the rest of the year, and write it off, or I could double down, and that's what I did. I said, okay, I'm not just gonna write off into the sunset. I'm gonna make some changes, and I did, and the momentum changed, and I have some great proposals out. I have some great new clients I'm working with. I'm leveling up on a lot of different levels. I hired a great business coach, and yeah, I'm proud. I'm just proud of just keeping going, I guess, is really what I would say.
Yeah, I think it's been a good year. It's been a good, more steady year, I feel like, probably for all of us after the
Right.
I'll say the pandemic so I don't upset people and say the C word, which really just means COVID. Oh God, I said it. So, but yeah, it's been a little up and down. And this past year has been the first year that's been a little smooth. So
Definitely even kill.
looking for more of that.
Speaking of C's, I have one, but do you have a call to action for our podsters?
Oh, I do. I wrote down some here.
Oh, okay.
So I wrote down, I have two things. So the first thing is figure out how you can stop and record your wins more frequently, whether it's weekly or monthly, whether you're a journaler, like Nancy happens to be a pretty consistent daily journaler, you can write your things in there and maybe write them at the top of the page. So when you go looking for them, you can see your wins. And the second thing is actually, I think I have three things, is the accountability piece. So if you have anyone in your circles who understands the value of your wins, an accountability partner or some business besties or something like that, share your wins with them, right? Get in the habit of talking comfortably about your wins so people can encourage you. And, you know, maybe like Nancy, we should all share our wins. So maybe when Nancy posts in January, that's what all our comments should be, is our 5 achievements. And then maybe thank somebody who helped you get there.
That's
right?
awesome. Yeah.
Like Nancy's client texted her and thanked her and said, this is where I got because of you.
Well, it wasn't because of me, it was because of her, but yes, I totally agree. And now I really have to be held accountable because we have thousands of podsters that are going to be waiting for this post. I love it. What I would say is, so I was going to say for our podsters to think of 1 or 5 things you're proud of. Let's go with 1 and say it out loud. And so either say it to a partner or, you know, someone in your life, or post it on social. If you do so post it on social, please tag us. You can either do hashtag unmute yourself, the podcast, or tag me or Beth on whatever social you're on, because we would love to hear about it. It brings us so much joy when we hear about things that you all are doing or things you tried or what resonates. It is one of the most rewarding things that I feel and have.
Yeah. Cool.
This is our last podcast this is our second to last podcast of the year, because we're gonna replay our most popular podcast the last week for the 3 of you that will probably be working and dialing in that week. Bethie, I call you Bethly, not Bethly. I'm getting a little emotional. I think this was great.
Yeah.
I mean, podsters, you need to understand, Beth and I, we met when she edited my book. She was my editor for Unmute Yourself. And we just clicked and we feel strongly about our message and we kept in touch and we complement each other really well. And I'm very grateful for you, Beth. And I'm so glad I met you. And I hope you have a great time celebrating the new year. You have good stuff coming next year.
Thanks. Yeah. I feel like next year is going to be a good year, and you as well. I greatly appreciate you as well, Nancy, for writing your book. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here, podsters. We would not be here.
That's right. That's right. So happy New Year, everyone. We look forward to seeing you in January. We hope you take some time for yourself over the holidays, and we will see you in 2023.
23, baby.
That's right, baby. Bye. That's a wrap on another episode of Unmute Yourself, the podcast. We hope you found value in today's podcast. We hope you were able to take a little time for yourself and perhaps think about how you're showing up.
And thank you for all of the great feedback we've been receiving. We'd love to hear more from you about what you think, the tactics you're using every day to speak up, and anything else you'd like to hear about on future episodes of Unmute Yourself, the podcast. You can contact us through our websites. Nancy can be found at nancymedoff.com, And Beth can be found at that'saspade.com. Or you can email us at unmuteyourselfthepodcast, all one word, @gmail.com.
We will see you next week, and until then, keep speaking up.